Hello and welcome to today's session where we are going to talk about the art of salary negotiations. My name is Annette Polikapova and I work as an HR business partner in one of the largest construction companies in Austria. Part of my work is to support managers when there is a merit review and we're talking about salary negotiations. But today we're going to talk about the art of salary negotiation from a point of view as an employee. And for that, we have two experts with us today. First of all, we have Kate Dixon, salary negotiations coach, author, and speaker. And we have with us Martina Ernst, who is founder of Salary Negotiations and Colorful Career. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and what motivated you to start your companies.
I'm Kate Dixon, and my business is really a couple of different things combined. So I do salary negotiation coaching, and I also do compensation consulting because my background is in corporate compensation. So I've worked with companies like Nike and American Express and Intel, and consulted with lots of other great companies as well. And I've done that for years and years and years. And I'm also a certified coach. And what I was finding is that people were calling me for advice about salary negotiation because they knew that I understood things from the insider point of view. So that's what really created the salary negotiation coaching part of my practice. And I do a lot of speaking and writing articles. And I wrote a book called Pay Up that also talks about how to do it right.
Great. Super. It's fantastic to be with you, Kate, and I'm happy to also be with all of you tonight. And who am I? As a former head of HR of one of the largest banks in Austria, and as former managing director of a service company, of an international service company, I really know how to negotiate salaries, how to design salary schemes, and this is why the both of us want to take you behind the scenes and help you understand your worth and and your value, your market value, and get the salary and career you deserve. And I'm also a certified coach. And tonight we are looking forward to answering as many of your questions as possible.
Exactly. For everyone here that hasn't seen it yet, we have created two polls for you where we would like to ask you to insert your information so that we can steer this panel discussion in a certain direction. And if you have other questions, you can type them into the Q&A and we will also discuss them right now. So what I see right now is that it's very interesting for every one of you to want to know how to negotiate a salary increase in your current company. So how do I start such a negotiation if I want to, negotiate my salary? How do I do that to talk with my boss?
So should I start? So the very first thing is you need to be aware of what are the company goals and what specifically are your goals. And then make sure that you work in this direction. Because if you are able to create an added value to the company by following your goals and by overachieving them, then for the company, there is probably no reason not to give you a nice bonus, because normally when it comes to yearly goals, the company or many companies compensate this kind of performance in the form of a bonus. And salary negotiations are, if you want to get your base salary increased, what you need to do is to broaden your responsibility and impact in the company. And maybe, Kate, you want to add on this?
Sure. I love speaking with you, Martina, because we have such similar views on this. And I think I would just tag on to that and say that, focus on the value that you're bringing to your job. Because if you're focusing on what somebody else makes internally, that's not really helpful. So focus on your value first. And then also look, if you're going to compare your salary to somebody else's salary, make sure that it's the external market, because that's really what you want to be focused on, is how your salary pays compared to the external market. So that's what I would focus on. And then I also have a tip don't use the word fair. That tends to be a trigger word for managers. And if you say, oh, my pay is not fair, that may be objectively true, but you need your manager to help advocate on your behalf to get you higher pay. And if you trigger them and basically say, hey, I don't think you are fair, I don't think you're acting in integrity, you're actually putting yourself in a bad position. So lead with your value, compare yourself to the outside market, and really look at how your goals match up to the company's goals, and then you'll be fine.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I also would like to add one more thing, which is very personal. Do not think that it's enough to work hard and be fully committed. This is fantastic, and it's great if you love your job, but it's not the basis of salary negotiations, and it's not the basis of an increase. So make sure that you really work in the direction of what the company needs, the added value, as Kate mentioned already, and then you can be sure to make the next step salary-wise as well.
Exactly. Kate, you mentioned that it's important to compare yourself to the external world. So, but how do I find out my market worth? How do I get this information?
Well, it's a great question. And the truth of the matter is that there's all kinds of resources that you can get nowadays. There, Glassdoor oftentimes will have salaries. Sometimes the company will even publish a salary range. That's becoming more and more common. And one of my favorite things is asking people who are doing this kind of work. And if you don't want to sound like a weirdo when you're asking them, don't just say, hey, what do you make? You can say, hey, I've done some research and I'm seeing that jobs like this are making between X and Y in the marketplace. Does that sound right to you? And that allows you to collect that information without sounding like a salary stalker.
Yes, and let's add on it. Do make sure that you do not look for the exact salary of your exact title, because very often titles are very fancy and they might not exist in the market. So rather think of in which area am I working? So am I don't know, a Java developer or a JavaScript developer, or what are my competencies, and then search a bit broader, and then it's much easier to find the relevant salary range.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just to tag on to that too, as a former comp person, I can tell you that the things that you'll find out in either crowdsourced data sources or even in the salary surveys that companies use internally, we look for an 80% match. We don't look for something that is exactly 100% aligned with what you're doing, but get close and see if you can get 80% or better, and that's fine.
When do you think is a good moment to talk about salary increase?
Yeah, normally every company has specific moments where they discuss salaries and bonuses, and often it's combined. It's not the exact same moment, but the same period of time. So this is something you really need to find out. Ask your boss, ask HR, because it would be a shame if you come 1 week later when the whole process is closed. Especially in big corporations, they are really sticking to the process. So make sure you are aware of it.
Yeah, and to tag on to that too, don't wait until you're having that annual conversation with your boss to start talking about pay, because by the time they're saying, oh, well, your increase is this much percent, and this is your new salary, it's kind of too late, because those approvals have been received, the budgets have been balanced and all of that kind of jazz. So if you want to maximize your impact to your pay, talk to your boss about it, well in advance of the annual salary, or sometime that's, kind of maybe in the middle of the year, so that you can kind of separate yourself from that process if you're looking to get an adjustment.
Absolutely. And the other thing is, once you get a broader responsibility, so another job, with a higher responsibility, a broader impact in the corporation, then of course your salary should also be adjusted. And it might be a big project you're assuming as a leader, or it might be just simply a different role with a broader scope. And this is a great moment then to discuss how your development as a total improves, and not only the job and the task, but also, of course, the compensation.
We have received a question now saying, what kind of amount should the person request if there is a new job compared to the old job? Like, what kind of percentage can you ask for? How much higher can it be, or should it be?
It's not related. The salary is always related to the specific job you're doing. So let's assume you start as a cook, just to give an example. You start as a cook, then you're paid as a cook, depending on junior cook, senior cook, or whatsoever. And then you move on, you are a waiter. And then you are paid like a waiter. And it's not because you had been a cook before that you get a certain increase to be a waiter afterwards. No, each position has always a market value, and you are paid according to the market value. If you advance in your job, you are junior and you then get to the next level, and it's still the same kind of job, then probably the range is something like 10 to 15%. But this is, I mean, Kate, maybe you can add on it.
Yeah, well, I think it depends. So there are a couple of different ways that companies move. One of them is a lateral move. So the company feels that the job that you're going into is at the same level as the job that you're coming from. So it may be in a slightly different function or slightly different competencies that you're bringing to bear, but they think the jobs are about equal. And then there's a promotional opportunity where the company thinks that the job you're moving from is smaller than the job that you're moving to, which is bigger. So if we're talking about a lateral move, and when I see these, I don't necessarily think, well, it's a lateral move, you shouldn't get any money. If you're moving from a cook job to another cook job that's exactly the same, maybe not. But if you're looking at moving from a business analyst job to a business analyst job that has a much bigger scope, even though the organization might say, well, these are kind of the same jobs, maybe it's got a bigger scope, it has a broader geographic impact, it's got a closer relationship to the profitability of the company. Those are things that you can ask for additional money. And with lateral moves too, it depends on where you are in the salary range. If you're low in the salary range and they want to move you to this new position, when they move you, that's a perfect time to ask for a raise, because it's a lot easier to do from a system perspective than it is in the middle of the year for no reason except for you're awesome, which is, again, cool. But so a lateral move, you might be looking at, 10 to or 5 to 10% as an appropriate request. If it's a promotional increase, I usually expect to see that to be around 10% or maybe even a bit higher. But it depends. If you're at the very top of the range and you're moving to a new job that has a big overlap, you might get a 5% increase, and it could be okay. But 5 to 15 is what we normally see for lateral or for promotions. Mm-hmm. Kind of a 0 to like 8 to 10 would be what we would expect to see for a lateral increase.
Okay. Thank you. So to sum up, it's really important to, if it's a lateral move or it's moving to a higher position, and what kind of position it is. And again, as you, Martina, mentioned, it's also important the area where I'm working in, the job family, everything around it. Exactly. Another question that I have is, currently we're in the middle of a pandemic, of a health crisis. So, but of course, there are still people that want to, negotiate a salary. So, is it clever, do you think, to mention such topics now that we know that the company is probably in the middle of a crisis in this overall not doing well?
Honestly, yes, you should nevertheless discuss this topic, because the company might be in an overall crisis, but there might be some areas which are absolutely critical to the company's well-being. And if you are one of these people in this area, you really add value to the company. And if, for example, then you assume the role of a project manager, really big project, you should get a higher salary. You should be compensated accordingly. So it would not make sense to shy away from this question only because we are in the middle of a pandemic. There have always been crisis moments in any decade. And nevertheless, salaries were advanced, or some specific jobs grew in importance. I remember the banking crisis in 2008 to 2010. Out of a sudden, compliance officers became super important. Before, you had maybe one compliance officer for 10,000 people. Afterwards, the ratio was 1 to 1 compliance officer for 1,000 people. And so the market was in demand of compliance officers, and the value in the market grew significantly.
Yeah,
so
and
always, yeah.
I think this is a place where you really focus on your value and, your comparison to the external market. Just those are two really key things. And I will tell you, I have a client that I worked with late last year who said, hey, I'm nervous about negotiating my salary because and she was going to an executive position, and she said all the executives have taken pay cuts. So I feel a little funny about it. And so we discussed what she'd be willing to accept, and she had some really unique skills. They were hiring her for a very specific reason, and I said, go ahead and ask for what you're worth in the marketplace and see what happens. And what happened with her was that she didn't get a big increase in her base pay and bonus. She did get like 5% on those, but the organization was able to offer her a huge equity offer that she would have never thought about asking for. But she allowed the organization to be creative in how they were going to solve that problem, which is that she was bringing more value than they were bringing in the offer. So.
Yes, and sometimes what is also feasible is you start maybe with a decent increase, and it's maybe not fully up to what you would get in the market in normal times, but you already define the next moment for the second part of the increase, so that over a period of 12 months in total, your increase is really market relevant. And it's just simply split into 2 steps, and that might help the company. And I don't think it's a drama if after all, then you are in the right position and sooner or later you have your right salary.
Perfect. In our polls, I see that we have now a really high interest in talking about changing jobs and salary negotiations during job interviews. So during an interview, what would you say, what is the best time to ask for the salary expectations or to mention them?
Well, when I talk to headhunters and recruiters these days, they're saying that these conversations about salary expectations are coming earlier and earlier in the interview and negotiation process. So they typically happen, maybe after a screening interview or even before you get an interview. And so a lot of people say, well, geez, what should I say about my expectations? And I think there are 2 paths that I recommend. One is if you feel really confident that you know the market because you've been doing research to figure out how you measure up against the external market, it's okay to say, hey, my expectations that based on my research, jobs like this are paid between X and Y in the marketplace. Based on my background, I'm targeting the higher end of that range. How does that sound? That's one way to do it. And that's a really confident way to go in. A lot of people, though, don't feel confident about it. They're like, well, what I'm seeing in the marketplace is jobs say that they pay between 50 and 150, and I have no idea where to anchor myself in that. And so what I tell clients for that kind of a situation, it's okay to say, hey, without knowing more about the job and knowing more about the total rewards for this job, it's hard for me to give you an absolute number. So could you please share with me what the hiring range is for the job, and we can decide if we're all on the same page. So that's one way to do it. In fact, I think most people that I talk to feel more comfortable asking, kind of turning the question around and asking the company, because, frankly, their company does have more information about, how they value the job than you do.
Yeah. 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 Or you simply say that you expect a market relevant compensation, and that you really like to discuss this topic once both parties decide that they are the right fit for each other, because otherwise it's like talking about apples and it might be pears.
Mm-hmm. True.
Nowadays, we have a lot of companies starting as startups, small companies that usually from the beginning do not have that much, let's say, money in the background. So when I start to work at a startup, and I really cannot find any information on the position because it's quite new. How do I ask on my salary for salary? How do I say what salary expectations I have if I really have issues in finding information on this position and the company is really new?
Mm-hmm. I mean, once again, you will have a certain role in this startup, and this role has a market value. So when you start there as a controller, you should earn what a controller earns so at least you know the range. And then considering that it's a startup, there are different phases in a startup. And there are a lot of startups who are already in a seed phase where they got capital from investors and where salaries are quite normal to another company in the same industry. Let's say it's a financial startup, then your salary as a controller is not so much different as if you entered, let's say, a small bank. So that would be quite comparable. Mm-hmm. So do not only because it's a startup think, oh my God, they have zero money, because very often they do have capital from investors and they can pay market relevant salaries.
That is such a great piece of advice. And, a lot of people that I know who go to startups, they're thinking, oh, I'm going to make, just tons of money because, the company's going to go IPO and all this kind of stuff. When in reality, as I'm sure everybody knows, the likelihood that a startup is going to fail is pretty high. So don't compromise too much on your base pay, because there are going to be other places that a startup is going to require you to, that their benefits may not be as rich. Well, they almost never are. The bonuses may not appear in the same way that they would at a corporate job, but also be really careful about any equity agreements that you sign. Again, you can know a certain amount, but you just don't know exactly how that's going to pay out for you or what it's going to be worth. And frankly, if the company gets sold, those terms can change. And so, you got to be comfortable with what you're making. And one of the hugest benefits of working for a startup is personal development, professional development, mm-hmm. because, oftentimes there's just so much that needs to be done. So if you show an interest in something, you could probably help out with that and get, a 10 years worth of experience in 2 years, right? And so that's one of the critical things that you're measuring along with the rest of your total rewards.
I love that, Kate. And I think this is really an advice. Fair. I don't use the word fair either. Correct and adequate compensation is super relevant, but probably even more is whether you really think that you can thrive in this position, and whether you think I'm at the right place here, I can invest myself, I can learn, and I can really help the company grow and prosper. So if you have this feeling, I would definitely not change the job only because I earn 5% less than elsewhere.
Exactly. You have to see the whole package.
Yeah.
Talking about adequate pay, how do I negotiate the salary for a new job if the offer that I have received is less than what was mentioned in the interview? Also happens.
Okay.
Well, you know, I think that it's important to bring them back because, you know, again, if they posted that the salary is between, you know, 75 and 85 and they offer you 65, that's a time where you can be curious. And again, I really advocate a collaborative approach to salary negotiations. So coming in there and saying, you know, that's not fair, this isn't what you said, blah, 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 that's not going to help you. But being curious and saying, hey, what I saw in the job posting was 75 to 85, and I was targeting kind of the higher end of that. What I'm seeing here is 65. I'm wondering what changed. And then they can say, well, we decided to make the job a smaller job, or, you know, oh, we didn't realize that that was actually made public, or whatever. But then you can have a conversation about it. And, you know, do it and try to get as much emotional distance as you can. Because, you know, again, it could be that maybe they made a typo. Who knows? And, you know, they really meant to offer you something different than was on your offer letter. But be curious, ask the questions, and then see if you can get them to work higher.
Yes, and you know, this happens to many clients. They negotiate something, and maybe this is a bit of an extreme example. I did not come across many, but what definitely happens is that there is a salary range discussed, and then the offer is at the very lowest end of the salary range. So don't just simply swallow or get frustrated, but always ask questions, as Kate mentioned already. This is so important to be curious, to say, aha, I see this and this in my contract is maybe not what I expected. Can we talk about it? Can you explain it to me? What can we do about it? So invite the company to rethink it, and put yourself not as the enemy, but at the end, this is the company with which you want to stay for quite a while. So make sure that you give them the feeling you row with them in the same boat.
Absolutely, because this is really a business transaction and a business problem that you're trying to solve. This is not, you know, Kate is only worth this much as a person. This is about how the job is being valued. You're trying to come to a solution that works for both of you, not just you, not just the company. So having that perspective really, really helps a lot.
Yeah. I fully agree. I always say to the people, you know, they negotiate their own salary package, and if you're already from the beginning, you know, you swallow it, and then you don't have that gut feeling, it's just not right to start in a job where you from the beginning you're not happy. So I also always tell to all the applicants, you know, they have to negotiate it in the beginning. Also, I feel that before you start a job, you have quite a better negotiative power than afterwards, because, you know, in the end, they still want to hire you. So you have a better negotiative power. Another question that we have received is, and we discussed it a little bit already. I received a new job, and the salary that was posted was fine for the job that I should have made. But after a couple of weeks or months, actually my job is changing, and I'm doing even more. so the salary is not adequate anymore. How do you talk about that? How do you solve this issue?
Yeah, I think once again, you need for this topic, you don't run after your boss and say, hey, we need to talk about it. That's really the worst thing. This is an absolute no-go. Fix an appointment with your superior and then sit down and say, listen, I'm super happy because apparently my role is much broader than what we initially thought. So don't say this doesn't correspond, because you're probably happy to have a broader role. So make it clear. And then you say, I would love to discuss the adaptation of my contract, because I was hired for a smaller role, and luckily you see that I'm fit for a broader role, and I qualify now in this role. And so how can we adjust my contract? What do you propose? And then invite, this is a little bit the same as Kate already mentioned, invite the other party to elaborate further on this topic. And you will find an agreement.
I love what you said here, Martina. I think that's a really strong way of going about it, because, you know, if they're asking you to do more, they're showing their confidence in you. So that's really terrific. So I'd like to offer my 7 magic words of salary negotiations, and this would work in this kind of a framework as well. So it's, what kind of flexibility do you have? So what kind of flexibility do you have, right? So again, while I'm super excited about how broad the role has become, and I'd really love for my pay to reflect that new scope, and make sure that my pay comes up to where it is in the marketplace. What kind of flexibility do you have? And then be quiet, because one of the most powerful things you can do with salary negotiations is stop talking and let the other person think and talk, because that can oftentimes work to your advantage.
I love that. I've never used this word. I really love it, Kate. I will note it. I always say, what can we do about it? But it's nice to have to enrich my vocabulary and say, what kind of flexibility do you have? I like it. Thank you.
Yeah, and then there's another one. How close can we get, right? So this is what I'm targeting. How close can we get? And I like the ones that have we in it, because it does feel more collaborative and we are solving a business problem. But sometimes, you just have to ask them about their flexibility. But, having a lot of these phrases in your arsenal can be really helpful.
Yeah.
We have received another set of questions still regarding to the current, let's say, crisis we are in. Right now, a lot of people are working from home. Not everyone is in the office, but still there are important topics to discuss, such as salary negotiations. What kind of channel do you think is the best to negotiate salary via Can it be done via mail? Can I do it via phone? Do I always have to do it personally? What would you prefer, or what would you advise?
Yeah, I mean, it depends a little bit on the company as well, because some companies, they do have, they do offer that you can go to the office. And so you could have a private meeting with your boss where you just keep this 2-meter distance. Other companies don't offer this. So you have to choose between phone or Zoom, Teams, whatsoever. And I think it's also a question of, we discussed it before, and it's really a personal question. I love Zoom or Teams. So for me, that would be the preferred option. If I can't do it in person, I would not do it via mail. Maybe you start just or maybe you continue in a second step if you couldn't come to a solution, which often is the case. It's not always that you have 1 hour and everything is clear. You need to follow up on it. This can be done via mail in between 2 meetings. But Kate, maybe you also give your different one.
I love what you're saying, and I think, you know, for me, most of my clients wind up being folks who are negotiating with a new company for a new job, and I might have a slightly different take on that. You know, I think if you're meeting with your own boss, yeah, doing something where you can see them, see their face and stuff, that can be really helpful. If you are, you know, talking with a new company and everything, and you don't have a true preference for one of these things, I would recommend doing it over the phone, because I like to, and this is part of it is my own personal preference. I like to have my notes in front of me and be able to look at the notes. One of the things that I find challenging about Zoom or Teams when I don't know somebody very well is that I'm really focusing on the camera, and I want to have that eye contact, but then, you know, I have to look somewhere else to where the person's face is. And I just feel really self-conscious. And I think too, that we actually use a lot of brain processing to process visual images. And again, if you don't know the person that you're negotiating with, you may not want to have so much stuff going on in your mind. You know, I do have clients, especially in tech, who feel very, very confident and competent in doing email negotiations, and they don't want to get on the phone. And again, if you really feel uncomfortable on the phone and you feel great about doing things over email, by all means, use the method that works for you. You know, I also had a sales guy who was like, no, I'm doing it on Zoom because that's my power, you know, stuff. And great, you go do that. But for most people, I think phone works well because you can have a combination of kind of hearing a little bit more of the tone of voice of the person that you're negotiating with. So you might be able to see, you know, hear if they're getting frustrated with the conversation, or if they're encouraging in the conversation. You can pick up on tone a little bit better than you can over email. So that's my recommendation, but I think it really depends on you.
Yeah, I agree. I have a final question for you too. What would be your top 3 tips for a preparation for a salary negotiation? Like, how do I prepare myself mentally for this conversation?
Okay.
I would say don't take things personally because it's not personal. And meditate before you go in, or sit quietly. Just do something that takes you away from, you know, the stimulation of your work and everything. Just sit quietly or meditate for 5 minutes before you get onto a call, and be prepared, you know, do your homework, make sure that you know what the market rate is, and, you know what you want out of the conversation. I think all those 3 can really help a lot.
Yes, it's a little bit the same from my side. Think about your self-worth, boost your self-worth. I love the meditation. Exhaling is also can be a simpler method. If you don't know how to meditate, just simply exhale as much as you can, because this calms you down. So that's very important. And then you also can take a power dress, you know, if you feel super powerful in this, I don't know, suit or whatsoever, or in this jumpsuit whatsoever, put it on. And so self-worth is important. And then the second, know your figures, market value, know your timing. Don't rush behind your boss. Just take your time in a meeting with him. And the third thing is, think about the added value. It doesn't matter whether it's a new company or whether it's an existing one. Think about what is it, what brings added value and that you can offer, because added value is always compensated extra, and added value means more market value also for yourself and higher salary.
I fully agree with you too. Martina and Kate, thank you very much for today's session. I think all of the people listening to us have got really fruitful insights and information on their next salary negotiation. If you have any further questions, you would like to get in touch with us, you can connect with all of us on LinkedIn. You can find us there. I thank you very much, and I wish you a nice evening.
Thank you all. Thanks, Annette, for the great hosting of our session. It was fantastic. And thanks to Aline. No one sees her, but we know that
she's here.
Yes,
there was someone
you.
else who helped us. Thanks to all of you. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.